the Centre for Change Management and C4CM Video.
Hello and welcome to this video brought to you by Pierce Mayfield. Now, you don't need me to tell you that we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. It's certainly not always a comfortable place to be, especially for change-resistant old dinosaurs like me. It's this problem of too much change that's becoming a hot topic amongst many organisations, with even quite small businesses and small teams facing a deluge, maybe even a tsunami of change. Recent research by Prosky, the US-based change management consultants, has shown that not only are 77% of their respondents already near or even above change saturation, but that this figure goes on increasing every time they carry out their biennial survey. With me in the studio today to discuss this issue of too much change and what we might do to address it, I'm delighted to have Robert Cole. Robert's Managing Director of the Centre for Change Management. Robert's an experienced coach, consultant and trainer in organisational change, and he works extensively with business and government, and he's also a valued long-term associate of ours here at Pierce Mayfield. Robert, welcome, and my thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. It's really good to be here.
Now look, let's get straight down to brass tacks, shall we? What is too much change?
It's a feeling inside an organisation that it's a rotten place to be. It feels like you're being overwhelmed with the demands of the day job and the need to change, and you can't decide which one to do, which is the priority. Typical symptoms that you find when you talk to people in an organisation with too much change is you get a lot of disengagement and apathy amongst the staff, particularly about when you bring along a new change idea.
Yeah.
Lots of anxiety and stress, burnout and fatigue tends to be things that they talk about a lot. There's always automatic resistance to change.
Yes.
You end up with a lack of focus on operations as well, and attrition and higher staff turnover. People talk about leaving. It's not a nice place to be.
Yes. Yeah. And this lowers morale in the organisation. Yeah.
Definitely lowers morale as you go.
Okay, so that's a long list of rather horrendous symptoms. I'm sure many of us recognise those within ourselves, within our own organisations. What is the cause of the problem, or what are the causes of these problems?
I think the principal cause is senior managers piling on change without thinking about the resources that are needed to commit and deliver a successful change. So they're just not aware of doing this. And some of them even assume, quite wrongly, that change can be delivered without any additional resources. Every organisation has a finite capacity to do work. And of course, change is just work. But a lot of organisations today, their organisational capacity is pared to the bone. They're really trying to get lean and mean.
Yeah.
And that doesn't leave much space left for doing the change.
Absolutely.
On top of the day job. And that's where the pressure on the staff really comes forward. The senior management roll out the change, and they just assume they have almost infinite capacity to do change, and it just doesn't work. We can see that quite simply the demand for change exceeds the available resources, which is the change capacity.
Mm.
That sounds quite simple, but of course in practice understanding people resources in an organisation is quite complex. You have to think about skills and capability. It's not just about bodies. And the real problem for this situation is the effect of too much change on the future of the organisation. Because people are being asked to do too much, they end up doing a lot of tasks poorly. That means both their tasks for their day job in the business and their tasks for doing the change, they don't do either of them very well. And then you end up in a vicious circle. That leads to unsuccessful change and benefits not being realised. You also get a lot of disruption to business as usual. Both of those lead to the business performing worse than it was before, and that means that there's less resources for doing change and the business. And you can see how an organisation like that spirals down.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. That all sounds rather depressing, but of course many companies have broken this cycle. So how do they do that? Is there a secret? If so, tell us.
Well, there's no magic about it, unfortunately. The challenge is the senior managers have now got to get a hold of the change that's going on inside their organisation. They've got to realise rampant change doesn't work. But it's not easy. These are the managers who have been initiating all the change. So they've got to really take answer to it. And clearly the answer is fairly simple. You just need to reduce the amount of change to the essential core, which has the largest strategic impact, that fits within the available capacity of the organisation.
Right.
But as I said earlier, determining the capacity of the organisation, there is a little bit of elasticity in there.
Right.
There are usually two types of change going on in an organisation. You get internally driven change, which is local innovation, trying to do things better,
Yeah, got that.
which is really important for keeping up with the competition.
Yeah.
And then there's the strategically driven change, driven ideally by pressure of events from outside and trying to bring the company into a good place to be ready for the future.
Right.
Both of those types of change need to be brought under control. And the best practice mechanism for doing that is portfolio management. The goal is to reduce the amount of change to fit within the capacity inside a recognised portfolio.
Okay. And balancing the internal and external drivers,
Yes.
because they have to both be addressed.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but you mentioned portfolio management a while ago, and I know that portfolio management is a big topic. Can you give us a high-level overview of where that sits?
That's a good idea, Adrian. I'll have a go. The basic idea of managing a portfolio of change across an organisation is to deliver the goal I just identified, which is to reduce the amount of change to fit within the available capacity. But there are a few basic concepts that can be applied. First of all, you need to ensure that all the change is aligned to the strategy of the organisation, including incremental change. And that gives you a mechanism for beginning to prioritise the change. Then you allocate resources to change initiatives to make sure they will be successful. And then that means that once you've allocated all of your resources, or most of your resources, down a priority list,
Yes.
you reach a point where you can draw a line and say, if we go funding change beyond that line, we're overusing our resources and we'll end up where we don't want to be.
Yes.
So
Yes.
people need to understand and manage the organisation's change capacity and capability, and then use prioritisation using the above constraints. And people have to make hard decisions.
Yes. So there are two issues there. There's the understanding of it, and then there's the management of it,
Yes.
with the wrapper of available resources around it and businesses
Yes.
as usual. So it's quite complex, isn't it?
It does, yes.
That all sounds very good, but implementing portfolio management clearly is not easy. And I'm just a tad concerned that we may be getting towards let's blame the managers mode here. So how can the managers be supported? What advice would you give the managers, and in a way we're all managers within the organisation, what advice would you give them, what tools to help them on that journey, to help them succeed?
My suggestion would be to look to some recent work that's appeared in the management papers. There's a couple of very good ones. The first one was an idea from John Cotter. And what we're trying to do is to sort of see how do we manage those change resources and try and keep them separate from business as usual resources. And John Cotter came up with this idea that there are two types of system inside an organisation. We have the operational system, which does business as usual, and it's normally managed as a hierarchy in the traditional way, and that's what we traditionally think of managing a business.
Yeah.
But then we have a strategy system whose job it is to steer the strategy of the organisation, decide what changes are necessary to implement the strategy, and then make those changes on the operational system.
Right.
And that's usually organised in a much more fluid network way, because obviously we're changing across the whole organisation, and we don't want to be tied into the structure that we're using to manage our operations. We want to separate them out.
Okay, so cannibalising resources from elsewhere is not acceptable, really, or is not going to give the right results.
No, you've really got to set aside the resources. The people in both organisations are potentially the same, but sometimes people are working in the operational system and therefore driven by operational priorities, But then we take people out of the operational system, get them to work in the strategy system, and their priorities are doing the change. So each person knows what their priority is, whether
Yes.
it's the day job, doing operations, or changing operations.
Yes.
And now there can't be any confusion.
Yes. Okay. So that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because you're saying that the change manager's change leadership needs to come from within, because the change manager needs that credibility, I guess.
Yes, change managers do need credibility. So they are normally part of line management, but they're given a new priority. And the other key second structural mechanism I used is keeping line managers and change managers as two separate groups of people. Individuals will move backwards and forwards between the two, because of course someone who's good at line management is probably good at change management, because generally they're good managers.
And good stakeholder engagement.
And good stakeholder engagement skills involved in that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Robert, look, we could talk at great length, and that sounds, I think, for now, a very good place to leave it. So, a fascinating and insightful look at change capacity. Thank you.